Most people do not lose what matters most in one dramatic moment. They lose it slowly, through small arguments, delayed apologies, ordinary evenings, and the dangerous belief that there will always be more time. Part 1. A small argument that was never small. He slammed the door over a sentence. Not a betrayal, not some terrible wound, just a sentence spoken with the wrong tone, at the wrong time, on the wrong day. Maybe you have seen this before. A husband feels disrespected by a simple comment. A wife hears coldness in a reply. A son reads a short message from his mother and feels judged. A sister notices a look across the table and suddenly the whole room changes. The chest tightens, the voice rises, old pain enters the moment. And what is so strange is this: in that instant, each person feels right. Each person feels hurt. Each person believes they are only defending themselves. But many of the arguments that leave the deepest scars do not begin with something big. They begin with something small that touches something old. A friend of mine once told me the worst fight he ever had with his brother was about a parking space. But years later he said, it was never about the parking space. It was about feeling unseen for half a lifetime. That is how life works so often, does it not? A small spark falls onto old dry wood. Psychology tells us that when emotion rises too quickly, the nervous system reacts before wisdom has time to speak. The body feels threatened, and the mind begins building a story. I am being attacked. I must protect myself. And once that story takes over, we no longer see clearly. I say this gently because I have seen it in others, and I have seen it in myself. Some arguments last only 5 minutes, but the silence they leave behind can last for years. A phone call never made, a visit delayed too long, a tender bond quietly weakened. All this from one ordinary moment that looked so small. So I leave you with this question today. How many of the heaviest sorrows in life began as something that seemed too small to matter? Part 2. We are less awake than we think, and that is the deeper point. The problem is not only the argument itself. The problem is the state we were in when the argument happened. Most of us are not as awake as we think we are. We are living half dreaming, half rushing, half reacting. In Buddhist language, one might say we are intoxicated. Not with wine, but with youth, with health, with the feeling that there will always be more time. And because of that, we move through life with a very dangerous illusion. We believe the important things can always be repaired later. Later, I will apologize. Later, I will rest. Later, I will call. Later, I will become the person I meant to be. But psychology shows us something humbling. When people feel safe and stable, the mind quietly assumes continuity. It assumes tomorrow will look much like today. It assumes the body will keep cooperating. It assumes the people we love will still be there, waiting for us to become softer, wiser, kinder. Have you ever noticed that? When we are young, death feels far away. When we are healthy, loss feels like someone else's story. When life is still functioning, we treat time as if it renews itself in the night like sleep. But time does not refill. It only moves. This is why we speak carelessly, why we postpone tenderness, why we let pride sit in the chair where love should be. I say this with humility, because I have done it too. There were seasons in my own life when I acted as though clarity could wait, as though healing could wait, as though the heart could be put aside and returned to later. But that is the intoxication, not drunkenness of the body, but drunkenness of assumption. We assume we have more sunsets, more chances, more ordinary Tuesdays with the people we love. And that is why a small argument becomes something much larger, because beneath it is a hidden belief. There will always be time to fix this. So I leave you with this question today. What have you been postponing, simply because you believe time would wait for you. Part 3. The intoxication, 3 illusions that waste a life. If we look a little deeper, this intoxication has 3 very familiar voices. They do not shout, they whisper. And because they whisper, we rarely question them. The first voice says, I still have plenty of time. Not always in words, sometimes just as a feeling. A quiet assumption that there will be another Christmas, another summer, another long phone call, another chance to say what should have been said. And so we delay what matters, not because we are cruel, but because tomorrow feels guaranteed. The second voice says, I will apologize later. Later when things calm down. Later when I find the right words. Later when my pride hurts less. But later is a dangerous country. Many hearts have gone there and never returned. A person can carry one unsent apology for years, not because love was absent, but because ego kept asking for one more day. The third voice says, I will live honestly after I finish this one thing. After the children grow up, after retirement, after the bills are paid, after this stressful season passes, after I finally have enough peace to be present. And so life becomes a waiting room. We postpone joy. We postpone rest. We postpone tenderness. We postpone loving the people in front of us, as if their hearts come with a lifetime warranty. We postpone caring for the body, as if it will never grow tired. We postpone living as if this life has a rough draft. No, life has no rough draft. That is the interruption many of us need, a clean and honest interruption. Because these 3 illusions look innocent, but they are costly. They steal entire years without making a sound. I say this softly, because I know these voices well. I have listened to them too. I have told myself there was time. I have delayed difficult love. I have treated the important things as if they could wait by the door until I was ready. But life does not wait by the door. It keeps walking. And one day we turn around and discover that what we meant to do later was the very thing that mattered most. So I leave you with this question today. Which of these 3 illusions has been quietly shaping your life? Part 4. The Dark Room. What we avoid is not death but truth. And this brings us to something even deeper. Most people think they are afraid of death. But I do not believe that is the whole truth. What we are often really afraid of is seeing clearly. We imagine death as darkness, as the great shadow, as the thing that makes life feel cold and uncertain. But perhaps death is not the dark room at all. Perhaps the dark room is the life we live without looking directly at what is changing. The dark room is the truth we keep postponing. The truth that nothing here can be held forever. The truth that the people we love are not permanent. The truth that this body is already aging even now as you listen to these words. The truth that one day, without warning, we may lose the chance to repair a careless sentence, a neglected relationship, a hardened silence. That is the room we avoid. And so we keep ourselves distracted. We stay busy. We stay noisy. We stay surrounded by plans, errands, opinions, obligations. Because if the room ever grows quiet, we might hear the truth breathing. Aging is happening. Loss is possible. Separation is certain. Change is already underway. And the human mind does not like this. Psychology tells us that we naturally protect ourselves from painful truths through denial, distraction, and emotional numbing. Not because we are weak, but because uncertainty makes the nervous system uneasy. So we turn away. We fill the room with movement. We call it productivity. We call it being practical. We call it getting on with life. But deep down, something in us knows. Something in us knows that the argument was never only about the argument. It hurt so much because it brushed against impermanence. It touched the hidden fear that time is moving, that people are fragile, that chances are fewer than we think. So let me say this as plainly as I can. Death does not make life darker. It simply turns on the light in the places we were afraid to see. It shows us that the ordinary is not ordinary. That one dinner matters, one phone call matters, one kind word matters, one withheld apology matters. I say this gently, because I do not stand above this truth. I stand inside it with you. So I leave you with this question today. What truth have you been avoiding? Not because it is false, but because it is unbearably real. Part 5, the climax. How short is a human life, really? And now we come to the question most people avoid until life forces it upon them. How short is a human life? Really? Most of us do not measure life carefully. We measure it casually, by birthdays, by calendars, by retirement plans, by next summer, by when things settle down, by that vague promise we make to ourselves, when I finally have time. That is how the ordinary mind counts. In years, in milestones, in distant horizons. But the awakened mind counts differently. There is an old teaching about monks being asked how long a human life truly lasts. One answered in terms of days, another in terms of meals. But the deeper answer came from those who understood that life is so fragile, so brief, that it can be measured by a single breath, or even by the time it takes to chew one mouthful of food. Pause. Just imagine that for a moment. Not a lifetime has 30 years left. Not 10 more winters. Not one more decade to get serious about love, forgiveness, truth. Just this breath. Just this moment. Just the brief space in which you chew one bite, and life is already moving on. When I first sat with that teaching, I felt something inside me grow very quiet, because it cuts through every illusion at once. It does not leave much room for vanity, or delay, or the small dramas that consume entire seasons of the heart. If life is truly that brief, then what deserves such a large place inside us? A bruised ego? A need to be right? A silent competition inside the family? A resentment carried so long it has started to feel like part of your personality? A loving word you keep postponing because you imagine there will be another ordinary day to say it? This is the turning point, because once life is seen as breath length, mouthful length, moment length, everything changes. Not into panic, not into despair, but into clarity. Suddenly what matters becomes brighter, and what does not matter begins to loosen its grip. I say this carefully, because I know how easy it is to hear words like these and still return to sleep tomorrow. I have done that too. We all do in some way. But still, the truth remains. If life is this short, then today is more sacred than we have been acting. So I leave you with this question today. If life is truly no longer than a breath, what in your heart is no longer worth carrying? Part 6. The lamp. Appamada is not hurry, but presence. And once that truth enters the heart, the next question becomes very simple. How then should we live? Not in fear, not in panic, not by rushing through our days as if spiritual wisdom were another task to complete. The answer in the Buddhist path is often expressed through the spirit of appamada. But let us bring that down from the shelf of sacred language and place it gently into ordinary life. It means this: to live without carelessness, to remember what matters, to stop handing today over to trivial irritation, to stop living on emotional autopilot, to stop postponing the words that should be spoken while there is still time to speak them. Appamada does not mean moving faster. It means waking up. It means opening your eyes in the morning and remembering that this day is not a default setting. It is not guaranteed. It is not a repeat episode. It is a portion of life already dissolving, even as you hear these words. That realization is not meant to burden the heart. It is meant to illuminate it. Because when you truly remember that this day is precious, something changes. You become less interested in winning small arguments, less willing to waste an afternoon on bitterness. more ready to make the call, more willing to soften your tone, more able to sit with someone you love and actually be there. This is what it means to live with presence. Not perfection, not constant serenity, just honest presence. I say that with humility because I do not live this perfectly. Some days I forget. Some days I fall back into habit, into speed, into distraction. But each time I return, I see the same truth again. A good life is not built by grand intentions alone. It is built by remembering again and again what deserves your heart today. So I leave you with this question today. What would change in your life if you treated this day as something sacred instead of something ordinary? Part 7. 3 questions you cannot escape. And so after all of this, after the argument, after the intoxication, after the dark room, after the breath-length measure of a human life, we are left with something very simple. Not a theory, not a doctrine, not a beautiful idea to admire and then forget. We are left with questions. And some questions, if they are honest enough, do not let us hide. So let me place 3 of them gently before you now. If today were a very short day, is there anyone you would still choose to resent? Pause. Not in principle, not in the abstract, but truly. Would you still want to hold that grievance so tightly if you knew this day was already fading faster than you imagined? Would the need to be right still feel as important? Would that old hurt still deserve the front room of your heart? And here's the second question. If the time of someone you love is not as long as you think, what would you say to them tonight? Would you keep speaking in the same hurried tone? Would you delay the apology one more week? Would you continue assuming there will be another holiday, another visit, another ordinary evening to finally say thank you? I miss you, I forgive you, I love you. And the third question is perhaps the deepest of all. If this life has no rough draft, how much longer will you wait before you truly live? How much longer will you postpone your own presence, your own honesty, your own tenderness? How much longer will you keep telling yourself that real life begins later, after the work is done, after the stress passes, after the perfect moment arrives? My dear friend, later is the most seductive illusion of all. And I say that not as someone standing above you, but as someone walking beside you. I, too, have delayed what mattered. I, too, have wasted precious energy on things too small for the soul. I, too, have needed to be reminded that life is not waiting for us to become ready. It is already happening. It is happening now. So perhaps the invitation is not to fear death. Perhaps the invitation is to let death clarify life, to let it show us what is worth carrying and what must finally be set down, to let it soften the voice, to let it shorten the grudge, to let it bring us back to this one brief, unfinished, sacred day. Death does not come to take the meaning out of life. It comes to remind us where the meaning has been all along. So I leave you with these 3 questions today. If today were short, who would you stop being angry with? If someone you love has less time than you think, what will you say tonight? And if this life has no rough draft, when will you begin to live it fully? Perhaps that is enough for today. Not to solve your whole life tonight, not to become perfect by morning, but simply to remember that this day is fragile, that the people you love are precious, that a softer voice is never wasted, that one honest moment of presence can redeem an ordinary day. So if these words have touched something in your heart, do not carry them only as thought. Carry them as the way you speak tonight, the way you forgive, the way you pause, the way you return to what truly matters. And perhaps that is where peace begins. Not far away, not someday, but here, in this breath, in this evening, in this one life that is already passing through our hands.